Europe prepares for a vaccine rollout. The French government unveiling how the process will work here as Italy warns of a possible third wave of coronavirus cases. In other world news, Venezuela gears up for parliamentary elections on Sunday. President Nicolas Maduro is expected to solidify his power base. This as the opposition leader Juan Guaido boycotts the vote. We'll discuss that with our chief foreign editor very shortly. And a big shift in Hollywood. Warner Brothers announces all its 2021 films will be released for streaming at the same time as in the cinemas. In the programme, we'll look at what that means for the film industry. Good afternoon. It's very good to have you with us here from the France 24 newsroom. So it is perhaps no big surprise then that the Italian government has become now the latest in Europe to confirm that it won't be Christmas as normal this year. Italy recorded its highest daily death toll for coronavirus yesterday, and Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has announced that travel between Italian regions will be banned over the holiday period. That, of course, making it harder for families to meet up. With the full details, here's Jean-Emile Jamin.
Heightened measures and a locked-down festive season to come. A new 24-hour record of COVID deaths in Italy prompted government on Thursday to return to a siege mentality against the virus and introduce a raft of changes.
From the 21st of December to the 6th of January, all movement between regions will be prohibited, even to travel to second homes. Attention, on Christmas Day, Boxing Day and January the 1st, it will also be prohibited to travel from one city to another. Within the entire national territory, there's still a curfew from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. However, for New Year's Eve, this restriction of movement will be extended from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
It means no traditional midnight mass, while restaurants only in the least affected regions can stay open until 6 p.m., including Christmas. Shopping centres will remain closed on the weekends, cruises will be barred until January 6th, and the government has resisted intense pressure to open the nation's ski slopes until the 7th. Italy's high schools will also stick to distance learning until January 7th. While the new measures received a mixed response in Parliament, many Italians on the ground have voiced their support, stating that they have seen the benefits.
After a while, we will see the good results. We understand that there is no other solution. We have seen it.
I think it is the best thing for everyone if we stay with our families and enjoy the holidays in the best way possible, while respecting all the rules.
Italy looked to be avoiding the same death toll as the first wave, when it was one of the worst affected countries in Europe. But the mortality rate has now overtaken countries like Spain and France once again, with experts warning it will take a while to drop. The number of new cases, however, remains relatively well contained, as the rate of transmission has dropped below 1% nationally.
Is now underway to authorise a coronavirus vaccine potentially before the end of the year. The European Medicines Agency may give the green light to a vaccine rollout on December the 29th. So how will the vaccination programme work here in France? Yesterday, the Prime Minister laid out the details.
Our country's health authorities have published a very specific list of priorities when it comes to vaccines. Recommendations include vaccinating the elderly in care homes first and foremost, as well as staff members who are at risk of developing a severe form of the illness. That represents some 1 million vaccines, which is the number we aim to receive next month.
Now, in the United States, President-elect Joe Biden has announced that one of his first acts when sworn in next month will be to ask Americans to wear a mask for 100 days. He won't mandate mask wearing, but Biden will request that Americans do so starting on Inauguration Day, that is January the 20th. Now, Biden laid out those plans in an interview with CNN yesterday, where he also said he would take a coronavirus vaccine publicly to demonstrate it is safe. Let's go to Venezuela for you now on the programme, which is due to hold parliamentary elections this Sunday. The President, Nicolas Maduro, is hoping to take back the National Assembly from the opposition, and it is therefore a crucial election for opposition leader Juan Guaido. If he loses control of the National Assembly, he will be left with no institutional power base in Venezuela. But Guaido has already said that he'll be boycotting Sunday's vote. Well, let's talk more about what is ahead on Sunday with our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, first of all, clearly this is a significant opportunity for Maduro, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You know, Maduro has pretty much ruled Venezuela with an iron hand for the last 5 years or so. But the one obstacle to complete power for him has been the National Assembly, or the Venezuelan Parliament, which the opposition won in a landslide in 2015. Maduro has stacked the Supreme Court with his supporters. He's stacked the National Electoral Council with his supporters. He has the full support of the armed forces and the police. But nevertheless, the frustration for him has always been the National Assembly and the opposition, particularly from Juan Guaido, that it has managed to affect towards him in these last few years, contesting the legitimacy, for instance, of the presidential election in 2018 and presenting himself as the genuine interim president of Venezuela, recognized by over 50 countries around the world. So this is an opportunity for Maduro to strip that legitimacy, that power base, that institutional power base away from Guaido and gain it for himself. He will have a full stack of cards then, and there will be no further limits on his power. The opposition is boycotting, and they're boycotting because they don't see how it's possible for this to be a fair election.
Is that right, then, that this election simply won't be free and fair?
Well, I think it's almost without question that it won't be free and fair. The fact that Maduro has, as I was saying earlier on, stacked the National Electoral Commission in his favor, the fact that the Supreme Court has managed to prevent many of the leaders of the opposition from standing, the fact that the civil servants will come under immense pressure to vote in favor of the government, all makes it extremely difficult for the opposition. That's why they're deciding to stand down. The problem for Guaido, though, is that his credibility has disappeared. And if he loses this election as well, his standing in front of the Venezuelan people who have been expecting him to do something about the government in Venezuela will be lost. He will also lose, probably, I imagine, the international support he has had up until now, because without that institutional power base, there's no real basis for governments around the world, the United States, the European Union countries, to give him the support that he's had hitherto.
All right, Rob, thank you very much indeed. Rob Parsons there, our chief foreign editor, and we'll be sure to watch those elections closely for you on Sunday and bring you the results as they come in. Now, meanwhile, the government in Bangladesh has begun a controversial operation to relocate hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees from the camps in Cox's Bazar to a remote island, and one which is prone to flooding. Now, human rights groups say that those who've been moved so far have done so against their will. Thomas Waterhouse and Selena Sykes have the story.
Film this, she says. They've stolen our relatives. Emotions ran high outside the Kutupalong camp in southern Bangladesh on Thursday as the first busloads of Rohingya refugees pulled away, bound for an island in the Bay of Bengal. The government claims these relocations are voluntary, but for the devastated family members who came to see the coaches depart, this is more of a push than a pull. Bangladesh is convinced that this plan will alleviate pressure on the bursting camps in the Cox's Bazar area near its border with Myanmar, where hundreds of thousands of Rohingyas have taken shelter after fleeing a violent crackdown 3 years ago. The first group of more than 1,500 people were bused to the port of Chittagong before being shipped to a 52-square-kilometre strip of silt known as Basanchar, an island that emerged from the sea just 2 decades ago. Locals say it's prone to flooding and that cyclones are a regular occurrence. Seen in these photos, the island's facilities can accommodate up to 100,000 people. The UN's regional office says it's not been able to assess the island's safety, nor has it been involved in preparations for this relocation effort.
Now, meanwhile, India is witnessing its biggest unrest in the farming industry in years. Tens of thousands of farmers are protesting in New Delhi against laws that they say will expose them to corporate exploitation. Talks with the government failed to make headway yesterday, and negotiations are expected to resume this weekend. France 24's Karis Garland explains what's at the heart of the dispute.
These highways on the outskirts of Delhi are normally choked with traffic. But for the last week, they've been host to tens of thousands of farmers protesting agricultural reforms. The laws, passed in September, aim to deregulate the sector, but farmers say they will lead to their exploitation. With enough supplies to last weeks, the growers are threatening to besiege the capital if Prime Minister Narendra Modi refuses to abolish the laws.
जो मोदी साहब ये गल करेगा जो ऑर्डिनेंस कीते ये रद्द करेगा ते ठीक है अभी तो ना रद्द करेगा बेशक लगातार भावें सानू 6 महीने रहना पवे ये संगत उठ के जाने वाली नहीं.
The Indian government claims the laws will give farmers more autonomy to set their own prices and sell directly to private businesses. But grain growers say they will no longer be guaranteed minimum prices by the government, nor able to make ends meet. On Thursday, 40 farmers' unions met with government representatives for a fourth round of talks. Despite not having reached an agreement, officials say farmers should leave the streets while negotiations are ongoing.
इसलिए आंदोलन समाप्त करें तो उनके लिए भी अच्छा है और आंदोलन के कारण दिल्ली के निवासियों को भी जो तकलीफ हो रही है उससे दिल्ली के नागरिकों को निजात मिलेगी.
Agriculture is the primary source of livelihood for about 58% of the country's population, making the reforms a hot political issue. They've compounded existing resentment from farmers, thousands of whom have committed suicide in recent years due to debt and increasingly erratic weather patterns.
Now, finally, Warner Brothers has announced that all of its films in 2021 are to be released in cinemas and on demand at the same time in the United States. That bypassing the usual 90-day gap between a theatrical release and streaming. That putting HBO in competition with heavyweights like Netflix. And it also signals a big shift in Hollywood when it comes to the cinema experience, as Fraser Jackson reports.
There's something happening. In the next year, Warner Brothers Pictures is bringing you the biggest premieres.
So this is the Suicide Squad.
In theaters and streaming exclusively on HBO Max. The exact same day.
But the what now?
A blockbuster announcement for Hollywood. Originally intended only for the Christmas Day release of Wonder Woman 1984, Warner Brothers' 2021 most anticipated big-name releases will be coming to the small screen via HBO Max, including The Matrix 4, Suicide Squad, and Dune.
Because of the pandemic, Warner Brothers and every other studio in town has had a very difficult time getting their product in front of people unless they're streaming. We all know what's happened to movie theaters and how they're making roughly 10% of what they did a year ago, at least domestically. And that's created huge problems, chasmic problems. This may not be what works in the future, but it's what works right now.
Warner Brothers hoped enough people would brave the cinema to see the summertime release of their big-budget flick Tenet. But the $20 million movie grossed just shy of $54 million domestically. Worried about facing a financial flop, some studios have pushed back release dates of high-grossing films, such as Daniel Craig's last outing as 007 in No Time to Die. In the US, cinemas typically hold lucrative 90-day exclusivity windows with new releases. In July, Universal talked that down to 17 days with partner AMC, allowing titles to go to online streaming services after just 3 weeks. Disney opted to ditch the cinema entirely for the September release of Mulan, instead releasing the movie to its Disney Plus platform as a paid option. The different approaches all have an impact on Hollywood, and some worry that the news from Warner Brothers may spell the beginning of the end for cinemas. The logistics of how revenue will be shared with movie theatres and its effects on the industry are as of yet unknown, and expert opinion remains divided. Warner Brothers has committed to their new release model for at least 1 year.
Well, those are our top stories this hour. Thank you very much for watching.